Welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure, where I'm the guest, and you can tell, the longtime viewers of this show know that I'm traditionally on the we will move right now. Okay, so I'm the guest, and my special host, my special guest, a guest host is my friend Rhett Power. With whom I used to do a show on LinkedIn Live. And Rhett has been doing a LinkedIn Live show for the past 3 years. So welcome, Rhett. The stage is yours.
Well, welcome to another edition of Grace Under Pressure. And as John would normally say, this is a show where we focus on what is often called the soft stuff. Grace, the caring, the commitment, and the respect we have towards others. And when we do it as a leader, amazing things happen. I don't know exactly if that's how you would introduce the program. I think that's normally a little bit how you do it.
Yep.
But this is really fun today to sort of turn the tables on you, John. And I don't know if it was a threat last night, but as we were talking about the show today, I told you I was going to ask you some really, really strange stuff about, and really dig into you and to who you are and why you, wrote Grace Notes. And so I think this is going to be a lot of fun today. Great conversation, and it's your 15th book. Now, you guys all know John. John is, first off, an amazing person, but when you look at what he has accomplished and the work that he does, it is just incredible. He's a Hall of Fame mentor from IFLD. He's a global guru. He's an Inc. 5 top 50 leader and a top leadership speaker, 100 top leadership speaker. This is his 15th book in 10 languages. He's a master corporate executive coach, and he's also a colleague in the MG Marshall Goldsmith 100 Coaches. John, welcome to your own show.
Thank you. I'm flashing back to the days of Johnny Carson as famous guest hosts. So, but most of the audience probably doesn't even know who Johnny Carson is. So we'll skip over that. But I'm just so pleased that you were able to do this for me, and thank you, Rhett.
Well, it's my pleasure, really, John. So, new book. You had to email me a copy because I just got here from Brazil. So, I did read the book. I read it in e-form. Otherwise, I'd have a prop here to show a copy of it. But I'm sure you have a copy of it handy, don't you?
I have a copy right there, right up on the big screen.
There it is. There it is. There it is. I love it. So, why did you write this book? I mean,
well, this book, people always ask me, how long it takes me to write a book, and I never know the right answer, but I can actually say this book took a year. And what I mean by a year, it's the year that we've all been living through. So last year, I started doing these video reflections about where we were and what leaders were thinking and should be communicating and doing for their teams. And I collected them, and they came out in the form of this little book. And this book is a set of reflections. And it's organized kind of like, it's laid out like poetry, if you will, little prose poems, very short snippets of things, ideas like fear, isolation, dislocation. And while we start in a dark place, the beginning of the pandemic, we end in a high note. We end on a note of hope. Because first of all, we are moving forward. We have vaccines, and more of us are being vaccinated. But my philosophy, and I know you think, because you write about this a lot, Rhett, it's until we take stock of where we are now, we really can't move forward. So that's what Grace Notes is all about. And as you can see from this cover, I illustrated it with some of my own photography. And so it's a very different venture for me. No assessments, no self-assessments, no self-assessments, no directives, just straight from the heart, and I hope a little bit of the mind about the experience that we've all been going through. So.
You talked about that process, right? Beginning of the pandemic, where you are now. Is that a personal journey? Or, I mean, is this book personal?
It's very personal, but I'm probably one step removed, because I was in the moment of creating the initial drafts of this stuff. I was very much in an advisory role, things to consider, but it quickly became personal, because how could you divorce yourself from the upside down world that we're in? And
Mhm.
how could you not feel the fear? How could you not feel the uncertainty? And to a degree, because we're human beings, we have a sense of empathy. So how could we not act on that? So yes, very much it became a very personal story as well. So.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? There was no way to really divorce yourself from the reality that we all faced. It was one of those moments in time, right, where the whole of humanity was dealing with this, not just a subset or a country or a region. I mean, this was a global event and a scale that I've never experienced in my lifetime.
No one has had. Our good friend C.B. Bowman said that this was a year of, I mean, if you look at the 21st century, we had 9/11, then the Great Recession, 2008, 2009. This year, we had a global virus. We had economic fragility, a form of recession, a very short one. We had racial injustice come to the fore, and it centered our attention, and rightly so, on the ugly things that were happening to our Black and brown brothers and sisters. And then on top of that, there was an electoral policy, or electoral discord in elections. And then to add it all, there was the climate crisis. I mean, the climate crisis has been with us, but we saw it in severe hurricanes. And, California and the West were consumed with fires. So we had about 5 major things happen in one single year. So no one has ever seen that, Rhett. And there's an additional thing. And I had the opportunity just recently to appear on the empathy concert with our friend Elliot May.
Right. I saw that yesterday, right?
Right. And Elliot has, folks of you who don't know him, he's considered the father of e-learning. So much so he was e-learning before there was even an E. But Elliot has an avocation of being a Broadway producer, and a very successful one at that. And so when the pandemic struck, certainly New York had to shut down its restaurants, but most of its theaters. And so Elliot, who's a relentless improvisational player, started doing these concerts where he would bring Broadway performers to perform on camera, virtually. And this week was marked the 14th month he's been doing these. And I looked at the performers who were on there, and you and I, Rhett, talked a lot. We've been able to adjust. You're a coach, you're a consultant. We can work virtually, but if you're a performer in live theater, there's no such thing as virtual. Well, you can do a little bit of it, but live theater is live and in person. Right. So the government didn't tell us that we couldn't do our job, but yet for public safety, public health reasons, these folks had to put aside their career. And now it's really tough, but yet they're here with us and they're still performing. And what a great lesson. In a key theme of this book is resilience, bouncing back from adversity, but also coming through in a transformed way. So
how do you, that's a great sort of segue to the question I was thinking about as you were talking. As leaders, you're right. We're blessed. You and I are both blessed with a great network of people and a great people that we can talk to. Right. We're not in this alone. We have a great network in MB100 and other places. But there are a lot of leaders out there that have felt kind of alone, right, during COVID-19. How can this book help people?
Well, it takes a snapshot of a moment in time, and the first thing I think, and it says you are not alone, and so the emotions you were feeling of isolation and dislocation, everyone else was feeling the same, whether you were a CEO or a frontline employee. But as a leader, and you know this really well, Rhett, because you write about it so eloquently, leaders have that additional responsibility, which is responsibility for the enterprise, responsibility for people. And I think what added to the complexity of this crisis is that we had to be in isolation. Leaders are typically pretty central to in physicality to the people that they lead. Now, I know global companies is a little it's broader, but there's always people around. Not now. I mean, not what we've had experience. People were working in isolation, and that led to a degree of that. And most importantly, I think it gave people a time, I hope, a time to reflect. What is it I really want to accomplish with the rest of my life? And I think this book will help you get centered around the cataclysm that we all experienced. So.
Do you think it helps people rethink? You mentioned earlier, and I want to hone in on this for a second. Coming out of this with hope, and you talked about coming out of this, that the book takes that journey from fear to hope, right? And some would say those are sort of brother and sister kind of. I mean, they kind of go hand in hand in some ways.
They do. They're complementary in a way. So
right. I mean, if that makes any sense, I think that there's a connection between hope and fear. But talk about that journey and why coming out of this coming out of this other end gives you a chance to rethink everything and to rethink your leadership, maybe where you are, what you want. Because a lot of people that I coach have come out of this and they really rethought their lives. They rethought what they're doing, how they're doing it, their relationships. If this hasn't taught us anything, it's brought a lot of us closer together with family and friends, and gives us a new respect for how important those relationships are, our new focus on how important those things are. Can you talk about that a little bit and talk about how this helps you kind of come out of the other end?
Sure. And I will say one word: perspective. I have long coached executives to take time to reflect. And, sometimes they look at me cross-eyed and say, well, reflect, I'm too busy. Well, I learned this lesson from a wonderful leader, Skip LaFoe, who sadly passed on. And he was the man who started the Saturn company for General Motors some years ago. And he was very much a revered leader. And he wrote an article once about reflection. And I interviewed Skip about it. And I said, Skip, you're a busy guy. How do you find time for reflection? And he looked at me and he goes, you put it on your calendar. Well, now we kind of had an empty calendar. So we had time to reflect. And I think, Rhett, getting to your question, that's why people are taking stock of where I am. And some of them will come out with a career change and want to do something different. But I hope people will realize, as you have expressed so eloquently, a renewed faith in others and a renewed faith in family, and sense of self and a sense of belief in oneself too. I mean, one of the lessons of this cataclysmic event has been that we have survived. I mean, we got hit and hit hard and again, but we're still here. And so we're moving forward. And so that's an accomplishment. And so leaders need to put this year, this experience, this pandemic into frame it up, put it in a rear window, but before a rear view mirror, if you will. But as with a rear view mirror, it's not totally disappeared, and we have to make time to digest what we've experienced. And I hope if you read this book, you will relive some of this experience so that you can gain perspective. Because what I'm doing is I have words on a page and some photographs that'll desire to hopefully that people will think about. And so you can think, yeah, this is what I want to do and for the rest of my life. And a lot of people, I think, will find a renewed commitment to their business and to the people with whom they work. So.
Yeah, that's a good goal to have coming up with this. I think, after reading it, one of the things that I kind of came away with, you talked about perspective. What I kind of came away with was never forget, right? Never forget this, because these are important moments that your people will always remember. it's left a scar on some. It's left a mark. It's definitely left a mark. And some of the things that you did during this time should actually stick around, right? That a lot
Right.
of people talk about how to learn.
And part of that perspective, I think, comes from loss. Maybe the most obvious loss is, at least in this country, the nearly 600,000 people who have perished as a result of this.
Right.
And so some of us have lost people we know, but in a sense, we've lost, for a while, we lost our way of work. We lost our sense of bearing, our balance. We were upside down, a lot of us. And some of us had a loss of identity, because if your identity is wrapped up in what you do, you kind of think, well, if I can't do that anymore, who am I and what worth do I have? And I hope that, so reflecting on that loss is a sense of mourning for what we have lost, and our way of life we have lost, but also a sense of grounding that life is temporal. And it's so easy to convince ourselves that it's just going to go on forever. Well, February 2020 told us it ain't going on forever, boys and girls. So we have to make of this moment and the moments going forward important to us. So make that mean something. So
you talk about rebuilding. What do you mean by that in the book?
Well, this is an idea that you remember we had these calls with Marshall Goldsmith, daily phone calls at the beginning of the pandemic. And occasionally Marshall's good friend and our colleague, Mark Thompson, would join. And Mark talked about rebuilding and renewal. And so he inspired me to think about, what does it mean to rebuild and do it better than what you have. And it's a good thought to have in mind. And when you think about it that way, it's like, okay, I've lost this, but I can make things better. So,
sorry about that.
It's live podcasting. Live streaming, I guess, is the correct word. So,
no, go ahead and finish. So Mark inspired that. I know that interrupted us.
Right. And toward that end, I tied in another mantra that I had, something I wrote in my previous book, Grace, A Leader's Guide to a Better Us, was the concept of focus. I have a little mantra, which is my reaction to New Year's Eve resolutions. New Year's Day resolutions, shall we say, New Year's resolutions. I'll get it right. Third time's the charm. And it's that sense of, what am I going to do? How about a simple thought? Focus on better. And here's the thing, Rhett. You define what better means. Is it a better colleague, a better spouse, a better parent, a better child? You define it, and then you determine, well, how am I going to be a better colleague? Am I going to be less judgmental? Am I going to be a better listener? Note to self. Am I going to exercise patience? Note to self. So you define what better is. And I kind of like the idea of better as understanding that you will not be better without making missteps. I can say, I'll be a better listener. But dollars to donuts, you're going to cut people off. You're going to be short. You're going to be expedient. Not you, Rhett, but speaking only of myself. And so, here's the thing. You don't throw it out the window. You go, I'll do better the next time. I will be better, and I'll focus on it. So that's part of the rebuilding. Focus on better.
Do you think one of the things that I'm intrigued by as people kind of go back to work and they and this sort of gets away from the book for just a second, but maybe not, is this idea that we have in the last year and probably over the last 4 or 5 years, I think, forgotten how to talk to each other and forgotten how to communicate with one another. And do you get the sense that that's going to be a major issue when we go back to work? That looking at you, John, when we sit across the table and we have such differences, I don't want to talk to you anymore. right? I don't want to deal with it anymore. Where does grace come into this question?
That's a good thought. I think will be a reacclimation process of actually seeing people face to face. I truly believe that. And yet, if we, and I think what you're discovering is our values proposition. If ideally we have deepened our values, what it means to love, what it means to trust, what it means to believe in others, what it means to be a good husband, spouse, whatever, colleague. And so people who don't espouse our same values, I think we'll be less tolerant of them. So I think you're on to something there where grace comes involved. And I heard a wonderful quote today from Bernice King, the youngest daughter of Martin Luther King. And she talked about, she paraphrased, I think, something her father had said, or maybe he said it exactly like that. You'll find good in the worst of us, and you'll find bad in the best of us. And so grace gives us that ability to look for the good wherever we can. And part of looking for that good is being less judgmental. Again, note to self. So again, so this book is very personal after all, Rhett. And so we have to work harder at it, I think. And let's be more tolerant of one another. And that's really where grace comes involved. Respecting people, looking at them with an open heart, if they don't always deserve it. So
how would you coach somebody on that? How would you coach a leader that's, and because to me, this is something that you have to sit down. I think, if you have any size team, guaranteed half of them are going to believe one way right now and half another, right? And to me, it's almost something you've got to address when everybody comes back and say, look, we're all on the same team, right? And they're going to be differences in what you believe, what you think, what, your take on the last year in multiple ways, whether you believe in vaccinations, whether you believe in the political stuff, everybody's going to have a different take, but this is how we're going to deal with this at work. Is there some responsibility for us to do that as leaders?
I think so. I'm hoping it won't be as overt as you said, but then again, I can be Pollyannish at times. So I think from a leader's perspective, what you need to do, Rhett, is to, if the issue arises and you see this discord between people,
do you think you wait on it, or do you think you go after it?
I always believe in intervention before, but in this one, it might not be, but it's more or less something, keep your antenna tuned. So if you're getting this sense that there's a split with people, you convene them and say, look, we have different ideas about certain things, whatever it is. But when you come into the door and when you come into this enterprise, you're working here, we believe in XYZ. And that's what is first and foremost while you're working here. And if you have a problem with that, then probably this is not the best place for you. So you're not dictating people's beliefs or anything like that. That would be crossing a line. But at the same time, if there's such a division that it's causing disharmony and discord, it's the leader's responsibility to bridge that divide. You might also, part of it be an outreach so we can understand one another more effectively. But I think you're uncovering something which is very, very problematic. And you and I have spoken about this many times. It's the abnegation of truth, and that you can get away with lying. And I never thought that we'd ever see that in a societal thing. Call me crazy, but I'd watched enough film noir from the 40s and 50s that the bad guys always ended up in a bad place, but they don't anymore. You can just lie. And so, but what that means is what you're doing by that lie, by failure to accept facts, you are denying reality, and that is harmful for the business. So even as a business proposition, you're in dangerous territory.
And the reason I asked that question is because to me, Grace Notes is a call to action to rally people to a common cause, right? And that's why I brought that up, because I think this is a time, if anything, when people come back to work, to sort of reignite that rally cry for your business, right? What is your rally cry? What are we really here for? Why are we doing this? And if this is not a time to do that, and if this is not the book, I think this is the book that helps people realize this is the time to do that. So that's why I brought that up, because I think sort of getting everybody back into that we're on the same team mindset, right?
I think there's much truth in what you say, and I think people want to be back and will, embrace this. But something when we have these discussions, Rhett, so often, and I don't mean just you, but all of us, the LinkedIn audience, and most of us, with the exception of people on healthcare, have been working virtually in offices. But there's been a lot. What about the restaurant employees? What about our retail people? What about other people who've had to work face to face, factory workers and all that? They need to be addressed. Their needs need to be addressed too, because their world was upset just as much as ours, maybe more so, or well, certainly with retail, restaurant, far more. And so we need to be coming together. And there's something that is endemic in discussion of leadership, and that's the concept of sacrifice. And we have sacrificed this past year. We have sacrificed our camaraderie with our fellow workers, the enjoyment we've gotten from friends, the feeling of what it's like to be physically one with my team, and so we've had to give those things up. But let's make this sacrifice worth it. And I have a piece coming out shortly where I quote from one of the final scenes of Saving Private Ryan, when Tom Hanks' character, the captain, is mortally wounded. And he says to Private Ryan, pulls him close, and he said, "Earn this." And that's what I say about this crisis. Earn this and we have sacrificed. So put it to good use as we go forward. So,
wow, that's a pretty powerful way to sort of wrap this up. But I had another question, but I don't know. That's a pretty good end.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's probably that, and we're coming to an end. And you've been a gracious host, Rhett. And so with that, I'll switch back to my host role and close out the show with a great thank you to you, Rhett. I've learned so much from you. And by the way, if you haven't had the opportunity to follow Rhett, do so on LinkedIn or on Twitter. He's a prolific writer, just a wealth of knowledge about entrepreneurship. Why? Because he's lived it. He's a serial entrepreneur who has lived it, and his firm is called Courageous Leadership. How about that for a firm? And he teaches others to be a man of courage, and a people of courage, let's say that. And so, Rhett, it's so honored to know you, and I say thank you for spending time with me today. So,
well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And again, congrats on the book. I think, Grace Notes is a must read. You have to tell people where they can get it, John.
Oh, so I switch back now.
You got to tell people where they can get it.
Yeah, it's on Amazon right now, and you can. It comes out on Tuesday, but you can pre-order it, and it'll be shipped right to your door. So that's where it is for now. So,
and I got to say, and just as my endorsement of it, I think it's a book that you need to pass around the office, or actually go out and get copies of it for everybody in the office. John will absolutely sign all of your copies if you ask him. But
I'm signing it right now, right now.
more seriously though, it is a really great book. And if you want to reset and rethink and sort of break down this past year, this is a great book for that. And so, thank you for writing it, John. This is fantastic, and it's a great help I think for people. So,
well, thank you very much. And with that, we'll say till next time.
Thank you.